I was going to ask you about recording this. It's fine with me, but I want to make sure that people feel free to share whatever they want to share tonight without too much concern about that. So if it's your practice to record things, I have no problem, but I just want to give everyone the option to think about that a little bit. Hi, dear Sangha. It's really lovely to be with you. I'm kind of the pitch hitter tonight, but fortunately for you, I went through a really, hi Jude, good to see you now. I went through a class with Paula Arai, the Buddhist scholar, on Saturday called Women Liberating Buddhism. And I hope you got a chance to see the information that Kathy sent out. I want to start by just telling you that when we go to any teaching or get up in the morning and face the day, or as Don was talking about, face the world, we're doing it is in these bodies and with our conditioning that is unique to us. And as unique it is, it's actually not that special. Everybody has their stuff. And so I attended this thing on Saturday on Women Liberating Buddhism, this seminar. And I realized that I was coming in, not with an agenda so much, but with an awareness about one thing that I want to share with you, partly to embarrass myself in public, so you will be more inclined and comfortable to embarrass yourselves and admit how life really is for you. And partly because it's the truth, which is that for the last month or so, I've been paying very close attention, not actually writing it down, but very, very, very close attention to how many times a day I want candy. Like some people drink, some people smoke cigarettes, some people, distract themselves. I don't have any candy in the house, but I'm acutely aware of how many times a day I want a piece of candy. And I'm astonished. And so what I've been doing with this information is every time that arises, I look and see, well, what is really going on? What is it I don't want to look at that I want to medicate with candy, right? And so I've turned this kind of endless desire into an embodied practice. So I'm looking at this. I did buy one bag of licorice, I'm confessing, but only one in a month. And I don't actually have an issue about this. It's just that I'm aware that I go there. Other people go other places. We're all going someplace with our bodies and minds. And so I've been paying close attention to this. And I'm telling you this because I went into Paula's seminar being very kind of tuned in to the embodiment piece of this. She didn't spend a lot of time on the embodiment piece. So the next thing I want to talk to you about before we go into her actual teaching is that because of my kind of relentless desire for candy, I've been thinking about the four truths, the four ennobling truths in terms of the body. So when I have this experience, I want candy. When I have this, I want something to be different than the way it is. That is a cue to me to go into my body and look at the first noble truth, which is something's dissatisfying about this moment that I want to distract it with that. It's in the body. And I try to find it in the body. And it goes on like this. The second noble truth is, well, I know where this arises from because I want things to be different than the way they are, right? That's why I want candy. And you can see I'm holding it lightly, but in the moment, I'm actually exercising. I'm exercising this. So I want things to be different. And I know that I'm either grabbing onto something or, more commonly in my case, wanting not to look at something, rejecting it. That's the second noble truth. And there is, of course, freedom. And the freedom, I think, can be argued is this, what we're going to talk about now, which is what Paula was teaching. Wielding liberating power. Now, I'm not going to go through the Eightfold Path, but you could actually kind of think of these as not separate from that path. So her talk was how do we wield power in the world? How do we ourselves wield power? And this is not the power that dominates somebody else. This is not the power that puffs ourselves up. This is not the power that does any of this stuff or pushes anybody out of the way. This is the power that is just kind of wholehearted acceptance, but kind of radically acceptance of what's happening here. Wanting candy, for example, that's the easy one. But, there are multitudes of opportunities for this in every single moment of our lives. So her expression is one wields power when we breathe space for not knowing. So using my, again, very rudimentary example, I stop when I feel a desire for things to be different than the way they are. And I wonder, what is this? Not assessing, not judging, just what is this really? Because I don't need candy. It's not a basic human need. Except maybe it is. No, it's not. So there's the first one, breathing space for not knowing. The second one is looking through expansive and contextualized lenses. And this is why I brought up the candy example. So the context of my wanting candy is not about candy, of course, right? It's a conditioned response to, I want to fix this. And so what is it? What is a bigger view of what the situation? What is it that's beyond the desire for candy? Because it's not about candy. Nothing's ever about what it appears to be in my humble experience. So we wield power through breathing space for not knowing, through looking for an expansive, contextualized lens. And in my case, what's going on that I want candy? What's bothering me? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be anything noxious, but what is it? The third thing is experiencing interrelatedness instead of separateness. So, we can look at the way we go through the world and separate other people from our own experience, even though there is not a single experience under the sun that I haven't tasted some of that someone else's. And Wendy, we were talking a little bit earlier about the guy, and you mentioned you saw him, the person stealing the bike, is greedy. And I do too, but I've been greedy. I am greedy sometimes. How could it be different? I'm not going to take that choice, but I've experienced greed. So there's this opportunity for interrelatedness. And I've been greedy about licorice, by the way. I buy a box of licorice and I don't share it. I mean, if someone was here, I would grudgingly give them some, but it's not my instinct. The fourth way that we wield power is to assume all beings want not to be suffering. And they want to stop suffering, not just for themselves, but for everybody. So it's hard to be in this space where we can be that open so that when someone is perhaps pointing at us and blaming us, they are expressing a desire to stop suffering inside and towards us as well. They are actually asking for help. So there's a fourth way, assuming all beings want to stop suffering. A fifth way is to moving through an embodied perspective. So this is where Paula did speak about the body, is to try to identify it in your physical experience. What does this feel like? Exploring that inner terrain, seeing what arrives, not so much labeling it. And I point to my head because that's where my words are, but not so much labeling it and separating it out, but what is it? And I'm not dissing words. I'm just saying, where is it in your body? What does it feel like? And then noticing what happens to that bodily sensation when you come closer instead of feeding it with candy or something else. The next is to seek compassionate interpretation of the events, which we were exercising before the session started. We were talking about how we could have the Dawn in his work has this relative and absolute experience all day long. And so do all of us, of feeling compassion for the human struggle and also realizing that's not right. That choice is not right. It's not wholesome. It's not beneficial action. So looking at other compassionate interpretations all the time, which also, dovetails back into really not knowing what other people are experiencing. So I think it's really important. And one exercise I've done in my own practice is when something arises for me that feels a little like a sharpness, a stone rubbing against this sharp stone, I try to tell the story of what's happening from the other person's perspective. I just put mine away and I tell the story of what's happening right now from that person's point of view to myself. So there's an example of seeking a compassionate interpretation of events. And that last one is to consider how to wield liberating power in response to unjustness, negative treatment, structures, environments. And we're in those environments all the time. If you just keep your eyes open, you'll see things, beauty and unjustness all the time. So I kind of think of these questions as contemplations on how willing am I to get myself unstuck? Because when I want licorice, I'm stuck. Or when I feel judgy about myself or about someone else, I'm stuck. I don't like feeling stuck. I know it doesn't feel good to be assessing and judging other people. It never makes me feel what I know is true, which is that they're me. So when I'm judging them, I'm really hurting myself. And so how much do I want to get myself unstuck? And for me, that practice involves identifying the stories that I keep repeating to myself when things seem unjust, or I want licorice. What is this really about? What is this really about? What is the story here? And I say that in a way as not to discourage you from looking at your conditioning, but to look at your conditioning with a kind heart, really kind heart, as if that young child who learned those lessons was right here, right in your lap, and needs to be taken care of. So not judging, but loving attention to your own conditioning. And the last thing that Paula said before we talk about the actual exercise that I want to share with you, she didn't really make it a big part of her talk, but it really was very effective for me. She talked about being in a car and following the GPS in her car and how she'll do it, but it's not comfortable for her. She wants a paper map because she wants to see the big picture. She wants to see the context. I know a lot of people like this. I'm willing to be dumb and just listen to what the GPS says most of the time. Sometimes I zoom out, like my car has a map and I look at the map, but I'm willing to abandon my agency a good deal of the time. It's interesting that I'm willing to do that. So that's the question. How narrow is my view? Am I doing the GPS view right now? Or am I doing the map view? And by that way, that map, even though it's often on a piece of paper, it goes on forever. The map goes on forever. So you can just keep going wider and wider in your view. And that's liberative. You're not stuck following the directions. Those directions are coming from here, obviously. They're not coming from outside. They're coming from your conditioning. So that's all kind of the background and contextual for how I entered that room. It was really wonderful. And then, so that was kind of the morning, and then many people left, but in the afternoon, those of us who stayed went through this exercise that I hope maybe you had a little bit of time to reflect upon. The exercise was to quietly reflect on the ways in which you wield your powers, liberating power in your life, and thinking about a situation that might be stressful or unfair or frustrating in your life, and then trying to find one of these principles that you could use to kind of reframe or to adjust your 1 degree of view, maybe just 1 more degree, or maybe 10 more degrees, or maybe 360 degrees, to just look at it in a bigger view. And so I think the first question is reflecting on the ways in which you wield or you strive to wield liberating power. And please don't get hung up on the word power. Okay. I know all of us are like, oh, no, I don't want power. But we're talking about you're manifesting you in the world. And it's a good enough word. Let's not get too upset about that. And I'll go first with this first question so that nobody feels put on the spot, but I really want to hear from you because I've been talking a long time. So I made a list right away, right in my little notebook, how I wield power or how I strive to wield power. And the first is to stop, because patience is one of my big challenges. I need to stop. And I mean full stop. Often, if I stop and just keep myself stopping from responding or reacting or even really doing much about the situation, if I just stop, something arises inside that kind of softens it. I sometimes will just sit, that's part of my stopping. I'll just sit down and take care of what's arising for me. Stop. So for me, it has to be at the top of the list because it's the hardest thing for me. The second thing is to listen. This is sometimes listening to another person, but most of the time it's listening to me, to listen to my own impulses without an agenda, without a judgment, and without an assessment. If I'm engaged with someone else, it's listening very carefully to what they're saying. And this is one of those times when I would try to listen to their stories if I'm not even there, like without me, without my stuff, really listening to how it must feel to them, what's going on. So listening. The third for me is asking for mirroring. So in my family, as I was raising my kids, we had this practice where if they, wanted to say something or we needed to talk something out, I would say, okay, I need to say this, or they would speak if it was they who needed to be heard. And then if they wanted to, they'd say, I want you to mirror me. And I would say, okay. And I would say it in my own words. I had to say it in my own words. It couldn't just be a parrot. I would mirror what they said. And then I'd say, did I get it right? And they would often say, no, you left out this and this and this. This is just active listening skills. It's nothing, I certainly didn't make it up, but it's very effective. So that's my third approach, to mirror what other people are trying to express to me, to make sure I actually did hear them. Because, I'm coming out of this body and mind. I might not be able to hear them at the first pass, and I want to hear them. So that's patience, listening, both to myself, to what's coming up, and to other people. And then the last, not quite the last, is identifying compassionately, paying attention compassionately to my own well-practiced conditioned responses. So, I know that if certain things happen, I will respond this way. It's like you have, a jukebox on your chest and people push that and they get a very reliable album, clunk, clunk, and it starts playing. So if you can stop and pay attention to your record that's just plopped down onto the turntable. Are we all old enough to know records? Yeah, we are. Thank goodness. So that's paying very close attention to my conditioned responses, and with some humility about those conditioned responses, being aware that they're not just mine. My suffering is nothing special. It's not even mine, not just mine. Everybody. There's no suffering that we haven't all experienced. And if not yet, it's coming to a theater near you. And so the last thing that I want to say about my own experience practicing with how to get unstuck, how I try to wield power, strive to, or actually do accomplish occasionally, is best told you by a dream I had a couple of nights ago. I had a dream that I was making a t-shirt. I don't make t-shirts. I don't know where this came from, but I was in a t-shirt store making a t-shirt, and the t-shirt was going to read, "Follow your hunches." And so that is the last way in which I think I try and strive to wield power, to follow my hunches, to not deny that kind of wordless knowing, that knowing that you don't know how you know, but you know. To not diminish that and not kick it to the curb, but be with it and let it be your teacher and not diminish it. So those are the ways that I have examined myself, trying to strive to wield power compassionately. So your turn, please, someone tell me anything you're willing to share about this exercise or just how you wield power. Happy, John.
I don't think of it as wielding power. I think of it as being aware of all these impulses. And every once in a while, I can resist the impulse. Most of the time, the impulse is to be a slug. And I just, sometimes I can be compassionate to myself about it. Today, I actually went out the door and did one of the things that I didn't want to do. But I don't know that that's wielding power. I think the power of it is just recognizing the impulse.
So can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
You made a choice.
Yeah.
Is that not action? Is that not compassionate action? That's yielding power. We don't have to use those words. I told you we don't have to. But action, acting is wielding power.
So I was acting differently from
You made it right. You made a choice.
I wanted to do.
Well, I think
around on the sofa all day.
well, you made a choice. I personally can't assess whether or not you didn't want to do it. Obviously you did it, so somebody wanted to do it. Somebody in you wanted to do it. But that's compassionate. That's the compassionate wielding of action. I mean, how did it go when you actually did the thing you didn't want to do?
It went okay. I mean, I dragged myself to the gym.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
I dragged myself to the gym. And unfortunately, I didn't get around to it until everybody else was at the gym because it was after work hours. And so I just went and did a few things and then left. But it did maybe energize me a little to move my body. So, and it made me not feel so this passionate, so unaccepting of myself.
So you were kind to yourself.
Yeah. So I could at least do that, and that felt good. And I watered my plants outside. They needed it.
You watered your plants and you watered yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Serena.
So I hope this is on topic.
I can barely hear you.
Oh,
I got my, come a little closer, maybe.
Is this better?
Yeah, it is better, right? Everybody.
Wrinkles, right? Oh, maybe I'll type it. I don't want to. I'll type it in the chat box. It's okay, and then you can read it. It's okay. It's all right.
I think we can hear you right now.
Really? Okay. Do you
Yes, can everyone hear her? Serena? Yeah? Okay.
think? Do you find that when you ever ask yourself why you want candy, that you can't tell? And is it the asking that's, I know this sounds so stupid, is it the asking that's more important, or the answer?
Mm.
Like, what do you do if you don't get an answer? What do you, yeah, something like that. Because I mean, there are times with food, not licorice, but, chocolate, the food group, that will come up, and, and I'll realize, oh, well, I feel like stuffing my face because something went wrong or whatever. But sometimes I can't tell. Sometimes it's like, is it the interchange I just had 30 minutes ago, or is it, problems with my mom that are more global? And like, so what do you do with that if you don't get a clear answer? You're not sure, or sure.
It's really my experience as well. Sometimes I know exactly what's going on, Serena, and I'm like, sometimes it's like I'm a little girl and I'm tired. And I feel like, well, what's wrong? I'm really tired. And it's simple. Sometimes something's bothering, like I actually think, what's going on? And I think, is anything on the horizon? Has anything happened? Is something left over, like an artifact? Is that something, or I'm tired? And sometimes I do not know. Yeah, I want to tell you that not knowing is not a bad answer. It just means that oh, you should turn your speaker off. You're getting feedback. That you can come back on, I hope, to respond. But that not knowing just means that, remember I said that my suffering doesn't belong to me alone, that it's not mine. So that means that my kind of the fabric of our interrelatedness is vast enough that I'm not always going to go, bingo, that's it. And that's okay. What's important is that I compassionately respond to the inquiry, right? Because what you're talking about is the hard part, which is even, or Kathy mentioned it too, noticing. And that's the beginning of wisdom, just paying attention. So, okay, just notice that. What is it? Is there something I can help me with? Is there something I'd help you with that would not be licorice? And if I can't figure out what it is, do you need a nap? Are you thirsty? It's just taking good care. Or is there something that I got to look at? Is there something really there? Or is it unidentifiable, but it is no longer fixated on licorice, right? It's just like a thought when you're sitting zazen. If you understand that your brain makes thoughts, like your stomach makes acid to break down food, your brain makes thoughts, you can think about your thoughts as bodily sensations, as opposed to big, meaningful experiences that you have to rehash. You can think about this thought or memory, or I should have done that, or what about this list, or what am I doing? That could just be a bodily secretion, like, oh, it's like just like my stomach. And then it does not have the value, the weight, the meaning. It just is another thing arising, letting go. So that's what I do when I don't know. I see it as It's a bodily secretion of my mind that I want this, and I don't have to choose it. I can choose it. But that's the agency piece that Kathy was just referring to. That's the thing. What in this moment will give you agency? And with your agency, hopefully, compassionate action towards yourself and all beings.
I was just going to say that is a better word for me than power, agency.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Serena?
Yes. It sounds like it's a process, and I'm glad I'm not the only one who doesn't have all the answers.
Oh gosh, no one has all the answers. If you meet someone with all the answers, walk away.
It is fascinating. You also discussed this, how we're all unique, so it's sort of not unique, right? It's almost like a uniform of
I think, yeah. I've been thinking about, everybody here knows about 31 flavors, right? The ice cream store. I've been thinking about, we're all ice cream, fat, sugar, cream, and milk. We're all ice cream. Every single person on the planet is ice cream with just little bits of different conditioning, but it's all the same material. So we're not so special. I mean, we are extraordinarily special, but we're not so special to be feeling burdened with this specialness. We're all equally screwed. How's that? Or not, depending upon how you look at it. Yeah, this is why you shouldn't record me, because I see stuff like that. Oh well. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing what you heard from Paula this weekend. I have listened to her. She's got a lot of wisdom about the role of women in Buddhism, and how we can contribute. And I don't know, I've been becoming more aware of how privileged I am, especially living in the Bay Area, coastal California, in this challenging era that's going through all these changes climate-wise. And it's just starting, and there's going to be a lot more human suffering related to those changes, more migration, more food insecurity. And so I think I don't feel that I'm on an equal plane with the rest of the world. I feel very privileged, and I have an apartment that's on my own. I don't have 4 people living in this 1-bedroom apartment, or some people have 4 people in 1 room. I can drive to various markets. I don't have to take the bus or steal an electric bike. I've got it good. But I still think that there are rules in order for us to function together as a society. for fairness. And that's why I get upset about shoplifters. And I feel mostly compassionate to people that have to lay down the rule, like Dawn, or Manny and Willow Glen, who got shot when he tried to intervene for some shoplifters at the Safeway supermarket. Just down the street from Angie. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's why I reacted so strongly when you said, have compassion for the shoplifters. Well, so the sitting was helpful, and I did find a little compassion there in my heart, but also a need for rules for all of us, even at the very top. Thank you, Pamela.
Wendy, nobody could be in your presence for 30 seconds and not feel your compassion. That's really true. So I didn't think for a minute you didn't have compassion. And I also agree with you that, everyone agrees with you. We have to follow the rules. That's the societal contract. It's both and all the time, right? We have to hold these two views together. It's not fair that someone might have to do something, think he or she or they have to do something criminal because they don't have the conditioning that we've had to know that there's always an alternative, maybe. It's not fair. It's not fair. And they shouldn't do it. And there are consequences for doing it. Both sides together. And that's the challenge of being a human being, to always be able to, look from this point of view and then look from this point of view. And it's not easy to see people suffer. It's not easy. I was thinking when you were talking about your privilege, I've been really aware of it myself. There's so much hardship, and I'm really so fortunate. And when I feel a little guilty about it, I think, well, it's kind of not my fault that I'm so privileged. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I just got lucky. And that's life. I did not choose my parents. Well, the Buddhists might say I did, but I don't know that I did. And none of us did. And none of us, are in that much control. But what we can do is compassionately try to level the playing field to the best of our ability. And that sometimes is just with how we go out into the world. I can totally picture Don at Costco doing this both and. And so he's doing that. I don't mean to embarrass you, Don, but I can picture him because I go to Costco. And I can see Don standing in the doorway and saying no. And also being loving to the babies and the people who are engaging with them. That's what we're here to do, is to be with everything that arises and as beneficially as possible. So I'm just like you, Wendy. We all are. Don.
Thank you very much for bringing all of these wonderful aspects of our world and ourselves or non-selves to the front tonight. It's very helpful. And as you were speaking, I could zero in the chocolate. I put it as once I had to quit drinking alcohol. several times, but finally, what I find myself is at night after dinner, I have to have sweets. Doesn't matter if it's cookies, ice cream, banana bread, and I make that stuff on my days off all the time. It's not always for me, but it's just, I have something about sweets. But it is, in a way, it's an addiction. There's something that's driving my physical body and my mind to say, I need that sugar. And sometimes I'm really surprised when I don't do it. And I go, oh, that wasn't really that difficult. But some things are, quitting drugs or drinking or smoking or a lot of stuff. And I have as much baggage as anybody else about things that I still do that I wish I didn't. And sometimes I can find ways to see it and sort of pull back from it. One of the things that I think is very helpful is realizing it or seeing when you start. For me, I just, at a snap, I can get really mad about something. And it's usually about somebody not acting the way I think they should or being respectful to others. People that steal aren't being respectful of other people. But myself is, if I can see that I'm beginning to go down a rabbit hole with it, to back off a little bit. So, okay, it may not change, but at least I see it momentarily. And like the other day when that happened with that guy trying to take that bike, I mean, I thought he was going to go for me for a minute because he really wanted to have it. He wanted to get out. But I was almost shaking. I was really pissed and had to get the managers to know this guy. And I walked away. I said, I got to take a break. And I went and had some water and came back. And eventually, a few minutes later, half hour or so, I was back to my loving babies and seeing Buddhist monks and saying, Amitofu, and smiling and having a good time. But it doesn't take much to snap that just at the whim, and that's sort of the looking at ourselves, and like you said, there's always the side of someone else that's suffering. And even I've thought of it more lately with either politicians that I'm very unhappy about or serial killers or people that murder and shoot people all the time. And it's awful, and I don't think it should be that way, and they shouldn't act that way. But a lot of it goes back to causes and conditions and upbringing and what they were told and what their surroundings were. And it even gets into, I think, where we are, as you said, Wendy. I feel the same way. I'm in this place where I'm sort of protected in a way, but that could change in an instant. So it's always nice to be able to look at people and have empathy and compassion for those that don't have those things, and whenever we can, to try and help them. So all of the introspection, but outwardly having compassion and love for other beings is easier for me than having love for myself, I gotta tell you. But I really am thankful for you bringing all of this forward, and it's great to bring it in and let it sit a little bit. And for me, a lot of it, I just saw it this morning on a Facebook page about Buddhism and something else, and somebody quoted that story of the two monks across the river, and the guy let the woman ride on him, and it's the let go. I'm mad about that guy taking that bike yesterday. And it's like, wait, that was 24 hours ago. Just think about your breath, or look at the bird over there. It's great when we can do it, but sometimes if it's as sad as someone dying or being terminally ill or someone really suffering, man, sometimes you just can't let that go, and it's really hard. But that's what life is. We just have to breathe and know that it's all impermanent. Anyway, I've said enough. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you. And Don, I just want to scratch a little bit below the surface because you said something that I found really powerful. You said a lot of things that were powerful, but one thing that really hit me personally is you said, it doesn't take much and you can kind of flare. You didn't use that word, but you can just feel it like a fire. And I thought, first of all, good for you for stopping and taking care of yourself. That's compassion. So you did take care of yourself. So thank you for taking care of yourself. But there's this other piece that makes me want to say, can you turn the light around? Definitely was doing something wrong. Definitely that person out there, that other person was definitely doing something wrong. But can you turn the light around and say, no, you said respect. So that's one of your buttons. Is that one of your buttons? You don't have to answer, you don't have to tell us. But for me, that's where the rubber meets the road. Like, okay, and I had this experience today. Something happened and I felt so wounded. And I exited the conversation so I wouldn't say or do anything that I would have to regret later. And I said, I just need to, be with these feelings for a little bit. And it took me a couple hours of just letting it kind of rumble as I went around and did what I had to do. And eventually I did sit in there. So it calmed me down a little bit, but I went right to it being an 11-year-old child and what it was. And then I found the other places where this had arisen like a weed in my life. And then it lost its juice just by being seen and brought to light, which is what Dogen is talking about. Look into your shadow. Look into the shadow. Now, I'm not recommending that for everybody all the time, but sometimes it's really, you can still have the righteous, just conduct, but you don't have to suffer. You with me? You don't have to.
Very good point. Yes, thank you so much. That's all part of the struggle and stopping and letting go and looking at it and having compassion for ourselves.
Yeah, this
Thank
kind
you.
of compassion. Taking care. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Do either of the Judes have anything? Jude squared. You have to.
I feel pretty square. Thanks. No, thank you for sharing so much of your life and your interests and your wonderful experiences. It's been very enlightening and helpful. I can't really think of anything just right off the top of my head. It's not that I don't have issues. It's just that I could spend another hour talking about some of them, and we just don't have that kind of time right now. But thank you so much for talking about this.
Thank you, Judy, for being here. Yes, Judy.
So many topics have come to my mind about how do I really have power? But I think about my work, running 2 care homes and, supervising, a total of about 25 people and taking care of 8 residents and their families. And so the topic of vacations have come up recently since COVID is still here, but because we're not so sequestered, and we can be more amongst each other, and it's easier to travel now. A lot of my staff, because for 3 years we haven't really been able to travel, and so my staff have been asking for time off, and a lot of my staff are Filipino, and so they want to go to the Philippines for a month. And I'm of the mind that if they have the time, they should go, because it's about family. We all have families, we all have loved ones, and these folks don't happen to have people who their loved ones live somewhere else on the other side of the world. And so I do have I have the power to say no, and I do have the power to say yes. And sometimes, I could get in trouble. So I had a finance meeting a couple of weeks ago where, well, let me back up. So the week before this finance meeting, which was 3 weeks ago, I got an email from our director of finance for California. And he said, yeah, well, your one home had more than $6,000 in overtime in May. And I thought about it for a while, and I realized, I looked back and I thought, yeah, had at least 2 full-time and 1 part-time person was gone on vacation, and we had to cover the shifts. So people had to work overtime. And so that's what I wrote down. I just said, we had some people on vacation, and, since I don't have any PRN staff or, on-call staff, people were willing to work overtime and did to cover the shifts. So all this to say that when anything comes up as an administrator, when things come up that I usually see things, and I actually all the time see things from a compassionate lens, because I know we all have families. If somebody calls, like just last week, one of my full-time staff, longtime staff called me or texted me and said, I have to call out sick tomorrow because my dad is having trouble breathing, and I need to stay with him and be with him for a while. And I said, oh, okay. And he was actually off for like 3 days monitoring his dad. And I'm perfectly happy to give sick time for that. And I have a dad and a mom too, that if I had to take care of them, I would need to take time off. So I always have that compassionate lens. But then on the other hand, there was theft that was happening in the house. And to that end, I had to have a meeting and say, look, these are the rules. This is the policy we have to follow. And stealing can lead to you being fired. If we catch you, or if we know it's you, you could be fired. So luckily, we didn't really find the person. We haven't found the person. And I think the theft is not happening right now because of that little memo that I put out in the meeting that I had. So, in a way, it's like, it's all of this is like my practice leads in, it informs me in my work, and it informs me in the rest of my life. So I'm grateful that you brought this topic up about being compassionate and wielding power. Because at first I thought, well, I don't have that much power, but then I thought, well, I really do. I mean, I just really do. As supervisor of 25 people, yeah, it's I could be a horrible manager, but I'm not. My staff really like me, they enjoy me, they want to work for me. If I call them and I ask them to work, most of the times they say yes, if they don't have a second job that they're going to. So yeah, I feel very fortunate to be in the position that I am, and to be able to be the kind of manager that I would want for myself. And I think that's really important to me. And you know, I do listen to staff and I do have compassion, and it's just I feel like, you know, I use the Eightfold Path all the time for myself. And I always have to work on the right speech part, though. Always have to think about that and be aware. So thanks, Pamela, for bringing it up.
Thank you, Jude, for wielding your powers compassionately. And I guess I'm moving towards Kathy's feeling about the word power, even though I try not to be reactive to these words, especially for women. Women have a hard time talking about having power. Just saying, ladies, that it's hard for us to do that, but it is your birthright you're here. So you have an opportunity to do you here in complete respect and recognition of you is everybody. So I just want to say, though, that if it's easier for you to swallow it, use agency, because, you know, your insight, whatever your insight is, whether it's from your hunches or you're sitting or you're listening or you're paying attention to this and that, whatever that insight is, your agency is what allows you to do something compassionate with your insight. So that's your power. We can call it agency. I like agency a lot too, but I'm trying not to be reactive to power. So thank you all for your engagement with this and for listening so attentively and for taking it to heart. And I really respect and thank you for your practice.